Hi there, Nicki Vee here from the 10-10 movement. So I'm here today to talk to you about consciousness. And what is consciousness? How do we evolve? How do we take part in this thing called life? And what is consciousness? How can it help us? How can it assist us to evolve? How can it help us overcome problems? How can it help us evolve to a place where we have a better experience of life? So I want to answer some of those questions for you today. So yes, I'm Nicki Vee, and I've been around the personal development, the spiritual development, the business development field for over 20 years now. And I've learned a lot, of course, about how to be more consciously aware of myself, and therefore I've used that in a lot of training. And one of the things that happened for me, probably around about 12 or 13 years ago, is people started to ask me, how do you coach others? How do you bring them into that level of consciousness? How do you assist them to evolve? How do you assist them to become more aware so that they have a better experience of life? And at the beginning, sort of some 12 years ago, I'd learnt a lot about asking great questions. And I realised that when we coach someone, when we ask somebody questions, you or me, when we ask somebody questions, we assist them to look at themselves, to think about things, rather than to what I would call it, operate automatically. See, when we operate automatically, we're operating in a kind of reactive way. You'll have heard Tony talk about the red and the green. And when we're in that red state, you know, sort of worried, doubt, anxious, frustrated, there's many words that will describe that. When we're in that state, we're normally not aware. So what he calls, we're not conscious, we're self-conscious, we're thinking about ourselves, we might be in a space of fear, but also we're not open and aware of what we're doing in order to get the result we've got. So we need to think about that. So I said to you that I learned and I've taught lots of people ask great questions. So I want to ask you a question right now. Think of a big problem that you've got right now. Think of a challenge. Think there's something that's happening in your life, in any area of your life, in all 10 areas of your life that we ask you to do with our life test. Think of an area of your life that's challenging you, that might be keeping you awake at night, that might be worrying you, that might be giving you pain emotionally. And then what I want to ask you, and this might be a really tough question to answer, what are you aware that you're doing that's actually making that worse? Whoa. Now that can sometimes feel like a really difficult question to answer, because we've got into the habit often in life of seeing problems as outside of ourselves, of seeing problems as somebody else is doing something to us, that there is them, they, the government, the illness, the weather, the something outside of us is responsible for the way that we feel. And so what I want to share with you today is some really good questions that will help you get more awareness. As I say, that means more conscious. Because as we evolve consciously, what happens is we become more self-aware. It's that simple. And when I started out showing people about coaching and doing coaching, I was asking them great questions like that. Be aware, what are you aware that you're doing that's somehow making it worse is a good question for us to start off with. But also, I used to sort of say to people, so then what's going to happen in the future if you don't get that handled? So I'd ask you that too. I'd say, like, what's going to happen if you don't get that handled? So that you get to the point where you go, do you know what? This is really mega important to me. This is something that I want to handle now. So it brought me to this level of awareness, which they call the law of cause and effect. So what do I mean by that? What's that got to do with consciousness? Well, it is said that as we raise our consciousness, as we expand our consciousness, as we evolve our consciousness, and remember I'm saying that means our awareness, the more aware we are of ourselves and how we play a part in what our problems are, how we contribute in some way, how we cause it, you might even say, how we there's like a part where we can go, well, maybe we're co-creating something with somebody else. That's definitely the case often. Maybe we're contributing some way, but actually the very thing that we can do to really help ourselves have a new experience is to have that level of awareness about self. Now, sometimes that's tough, as I said earlier. So let's just take a breath and let's just say, remember that problem we've got again. And we remember that thing, the thing that I asked you, which is, what are you aware that you might be doing? What part might you be playing that is not really helping? And the easiest way to do that is become the observer of self. That again is a great example of consciousness, to be the observer of self. And the more we are willing and the more we can observe ourselves, the more conscious we become, the more we can participate in our own healing, the more we can participate in resolving issues, the more we can go towards others. So if the challenge that you've thought about is with another person, when we start to become aware and conscious of the part that we play, can you see how that kind of helps the situation? I was on the phone with someone only yesterday, and I was talking to this girl, and I asked her, so what's really going on? What's the problem right now? She said, I feel this terrible feeling of guilt. And I said, wow. I said, well, let me just first of all share with you my understanding that guilt and shame and humiliation are very low levels of consciousness. And this person is feeling this and being in this space of guilt without the awareness that this is a very low level of consciousness. And she said, well, what do you mean by that, Nicki? And I said, well, look, here's the thing. When we get something upsets us and we get angry, we'll often outwardly express that anger and it's out of our bodies. But when we feel guilt, if you think about that, it's almost like we're turning on ourselves, we're turning inward and feeling bad in some way about ourselves. So it's a sort of very low level of consciousness of energy, right? And when we start to go, okay, so this something else is making me feel guilty. Something else is affecting me, this situation we've got going on right now, or the fact that I can't go and see people, or the fact that I can't find time to be with my kids and with my business at the same time, which was what this situation was. And when we started to understand it and understand that feeling that she had inside of her, and I started to ask her the question, so what are you doing? What are you aware that you're doing that's not helpful here? She said, I'm making myself wrong. And I said to her, so look, to really raise and expand our level of consciousness, let me ask you another question. Where have you learnt that from? And she went, well, my mom always felt guilty and found ways. And, this is violating, if you like, the rule of cause and effect, which says, she did it to me. I am the victim. But when I said, who taught it you? She started to notice that she wasn't saying, Mom did it to me. She was just saying, I noticed what Mom used to do. And Mom used to feel guilty about things. Therefore, she used to get into a bad state. So when we hear that, she could now understand, or we can now understand, how we're running the same kind of pattern. And as you think about that, it starts to be more aware, more conscious of the fact that everybody's doing the best they can with the resources they've got at the time. And so whatever we say about Mom, whatever we say about our partner, the kids, the government, the company, if we start saying they are doing something to me, then we're the victim of that. But if when we start having a level of consciousness and we start to raise that level and we start to expand that level of consciousness and we say, let me be aware of my part in it. Let me see how I've just copied her. She was just doing the best she can, so I've just copied that. And actually, there's no need for me to feel that way, because whatever happens from outside of me, I have the responsibility, I have the choice not to see it that way. And when we talk about expanding and levels of consciousness, when we get to a certain level, and some say that this is like a very high level, it's like a high level of awareness and a high level of consciousness, is that we look at everything and we say in a very gentle way to ourselves, how have I caused that? How have I contributed? How have I co-created that? How have I played a part in that? So that I'm having that experience of someone else, of somebody else, of something else. And so I'm going to leave it there because I've mentioned so many things and asked you a few questions, and I just want to leave it there with a few more questions for you, just so that you can see that in order to be more conscious, this is all we need to do sometimes, is just to ask ourselves a few questions. So let me just remind you of those questions. Ask yourself, how have I played a part in that? That was maybe not that helpful. How have I contributed to this situation in a way that has not been useful? That a way that maybe may have made it more difficult for the other person or for the other thing. And then we might even be brave enough as we get older, as we get more mature, as we get to more expansion and we evolve and our consciousness evolves. When we get to that space where we can actually say to ourselves, again very gently, how have I caused that? We will then know that we are on the right end of the cause and effect paradigm. Because when we're at effect, we're the victim, where we're just making it about other people or other things, everything outside of ourselves, there's nowhere to go. There's no awareness, there's no consciousness, and the likelihood of us continuing to feel that experience, that pain, that low level on a scale of 0 to 10, the likelihood is that will continue. So our future is in our own hands as we together continue the journey towards being even more conscious. And trust that you enjoyed the video. And as I always say, time to take some action. So I'm trusting that you answered some of the questions that I asked. And I know that they were tough questions to answer. But you know, I would recommend that the action that comes from this video is that you answer those questions and then you ask yourself another one, which is like, what decision am I making now I've had that realization and I've got to that level of awareness and consciousness? And often that can be to maybe have a conversation with someone, or maybe just to take a decision that causes you to have perhaps a different ritual in the morning of each day. You ask yourself different questions, or you do something different each day. So that's the action that I would recommend you take from this video that you've just watched. So as always, if you would like to comment, if you would like to share, if you would like to ask me any questions, just put your comments or questions in the area below. And also do remember to press the subscribe button and subscribe to this channel, and also hit the notification bell so that actually you get notified of the next video that comes out. We actually post 2 videos a week on the 1010 Movement channel. So until next time, bye bye.